Hello, Flosstube people, users of the YouTubes. I am Allie Renee, and this is Allie Renee's Copious Spare Time. I am a crafter, a costume designer, stitcher, educator, nerd, etc. I'm recording a couple of videos today. I just recorded one with no sound, so that was not useful. So I'm doing it again. This is an intro to some dyeing videos that I did. On Monday, I took a bunch of my Ada and linen, took the unmolested linen and Ada that I had laying about, a lot of which I've acquired from craft stores. I also bought a couple of like those tubes of even weave and linen that you can get at Michael's, and I think one from Hobby Lobby, which I know is evil. I'm sorry, I shop there. Kind of limited sometimes, but don't worry, I wear something subversive every time I go in there, talk loudly about women's rights. So and then donate money later. So I did some dyeing of things, and just wanted to show you the results. I'll insert the videos. Let me show you. I'll insert the videos of the recording now, and then I'll come back later and you can see the final results. Time to serge this pile of needlework fabric with Mr. Juki. So when you come to the corner, you stop with your needle up. So I'm going to turn it forward. Then I lift the presser foot and pivot. And then put the presser foot back down and sew. And I have a nice corner. All right, I have prepped all my fabrics by serging the edges. I have a whole range here, things I bought at Michael's, DMC linen. This is some Ada I got at the thrift store. This is some like house, like cardboard Ada I got from AliExpress, but it's the iridescent kind. There you can see the sparkle. This is a little random collection of different even weaves and Ada scraps that I got at the used craft store in my town for like $2.99 for this little lot. And then here's some from Michael's, or not, sorry, Michael's. This is from Hobby Lobby, which I know is evil, but I'm going to use it to do something subversive, so it will make me feel a little bit better about my choices. So I'm going to dye these. I've already prepped them, so now I need to wash them and then throw them in dye. So here I've taken this large piece of Ada and added a bunch of purple to it for my tiny modernist zodiac, and I'm going to do some other colors on there too. I'm trying to make a nice purple midnight galaxy kind of situation. And then this piece of Ada, I'm trying to do a rainbow effect. So I've added yellow here, and then I'm going to add the red, and hopefully that mixes into orange. And then I've added violet here. Then I'm going to do blue and hopefully make the green. We'll see what happens. Okay, here I've done the red now, you can see, and I added a little bit of yellow into the middle section to make more of an orange. So I'm going to rinse that out. Okay, I have added the blue and let the blue mix into the yellow a little bit, and I've added some indigo, like some darker blue mixed with purple, and now I'm going to rinse it out. So the green isn't as strong as I'd like, but I don't really think it's fine. I think it's fine. Green sometimes gets a little muddy anyway, so I think that'll be okay. So I'm going to rinse this out. And then here is the galaxy one. I have added, it had purple, I added some of the cardinal red and some spots to make like pink, and then I've added some evening blue to make those spots. So I'm going to rinse this out and see how it is, and then I might need to redo it. I'm just letting it soak, and occasionally I move it around because I want it to be dark. This is for that one that's supposed to be like a sky, you know, because there's a lot of white and gold and cream around the edges, so I think it'll be cool. I have thrown some splotches all over this one, And then this one's gonna just be a bunch of random splotch colors, and we'll see. And that's on that iridescent stuff. Well, this is turning out pretty good, except for, let me show you, where there was a crease in the fabric, but even though I washed it, the crease still left kind of like a line down the thing. So I'm gonna try to add some dye over that to fade it out a bit. Okay, so when I'm ombreing the edges, I fold it like this, so all of the edges are in line. And then I'll dip in one corner and dip in the other corner, and then kind of let it, bleed a little bit. And then I go and rinse it out. And then I just keep doing it till it's the desired effect. Now, you have to go further than you want, because remember, some of this you're gonna lose when you wrap the edge. So I might do it one more time so I have like a ½ inch to an inch to wrap around the edge of a board, and then so I can still see the ombre effect. So I just rinsed this out, and it's looking pretty yummy. There's one hot spot. Where is it? Like right there, a little hot, meaning more white than I want to show. There's probably one more, but I don't know, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay. I'll look at it some more. Maybe it's more red than I want. It actually looks redder on camera than when I look at it with the naked eye. So maybe I'll add some more blue in that pinky land right there. Okay. So this one, I want to add little flecks to this one for like Halloween. So I'm using a paintbrush. I'm gonna stop focusing, sorry. There we go. And hitting it with some black dye with little flecks all over. So then once I'm done dyeing and get them vaguely dry, I will then iron them. And sometimes I hit them with a little bit of starch. I'm using this Dryel spray starch alternative. Okay, so some of the techniques that I'm using, basically, I've been dyeing a while, but mostly I'm dyeing for costume stuff. And often when I'm using dye, so often with costumes, you're dyeing like large loads of fabric to create something. You want to change the color. And so you will usually do it in a big like soup vat. Occasionally you're dyeing small things, so then I might use a pot to do that. Often when I'm using dye, I'm using it to add texture to things too, like to distress things or tone down the color. Because sometimes on stage, like if you put a white shirt on stage, it could be really, really bright. So sometimes we do a thing, we call it teching it down, where we just like take it down a little bit with like some ecru or something, just to tone down the white so it's not like in your face, because then you hit that with the intense lumens of a stage light and it just glows, right? It takes over. So I'm doing a lot of that, but then occasionally I'm doing it to add texture to things. So say you're doing like you're doing Grapes of Wrath or something, which is a play that takes place during the Dust Bowl, right? So it's like the Depression, people are exodusters, they're people who left the South, Oklahoma, and placed during that there was a major drought, right? And so they're traveling to California to try to get work. So that all those characters are wearing clothes that they've been wearing a while. They've been living in out of their cars. They've been living in makeshift tents, right? So they wouldn't be pristine. So we usually will distress costumes, which is what we call like making them look like they've been lived in for a long time. Because oftentimes we're taking new things, or we're making new things, and then we need to make them look like they've been worn for many years or in serious conditions, right? So we will take like a men's dress shirt that we might buy at the thrift store. In order to make it look vintage, like 1930s, we might take the collar, the fold over collar off, and leave it as a band collar, because a lot of times men wore shirts at that point which had no collar. They'd attach a paper collar or a fabric collar to it and then trade that out. So a lot of times you'll see the men in that situation wouldn't be wearing the collar on their shirt. They just have the band. So you'd take that shirt and then you'd make it look old. Like you might rip up the seam a little bit at the top edge, and often so that it looks like it's been worn over and over again. And I'll use like sandpaper to do that, or rasps. I have all kinds of crazy tools. I will beat things with a hammer, use a power sander on things to distress them. Like I do this on jeans all the time, so it looks like it's been worn and ripped up. I'll drag things through dirt and chew things up, etc. So if I wanted to make a costume look dirty, I could put it in dirt, but then as soon as I wash that costume, most of the dirt will come out. Plus, then the costume's dirty for the actor to wear, which is not great. So usually we will simulate the look of dirt with things like dye and paint, right? So I can make it look like an actor, the character has been walking through muddy water for a while by dyeing the bottom half of his pants darker, right? Like, so it looks like mud has caked on. So I can dip the bottom half of his trousers in like brown dye, kind of like an ombre effect, right? And so you'll do things like that. Then you might actually then take acrylic paint or fabric paint and add some stuff to it. Like sometimes I'll put like little bits of things and then paint that on to make it look like mud is caked on. But then I can still wash the costume and that most of that won't come off, right? So I don't have to keep upkeep because then costumes are being worn over and over again, etc. So we're doing, as a costume designer, you're doing all kinds of weird crafty stuff to do that. And so things like sometimes I want like a tie-dye effect, but not like hippie tie-dye. I will use that to create like a costume that wants to look like water. Like if I'm doing Shakespeare and I'm doing fairies or something, and I want the fairy costume, like I want Ariel to look like Ariel is of the wind. So maybe I take silk and I do kind of a mottled texture, marbling texture on the silk to make it look like it's has blues and grays and greens, etc. in it. So I'm doing a lot of that for specific character to tell the story about the character. So anyway, so I've learned a bunch of techniques to do this. And so it's been really fun and interesting to take all this stuff that I know and play around with. I mean, a big part of my job as a costume designer when I'm creating things, it's a lot of experimentation. So it's been taking that experimental kind of ideas about how I create texture and color and stuff in costume fabric and then translating it to my cross stitch stuff has been pretty fun. And then sharing that with you. So maybe you want to try things out. I mean, I also want to emphasize that I am constantly making mistakes and I'm not great. There are people that are so much better than me at this. That's their, within the field of costume, there are people that is their only job and they get paid well or they get paid consistently to be the dyer on a show. The dyer painter is usually what we call that job. Like the person who does that for real, as a part of their job. I'm one of those people that just does all the things, but I don't necessarily do all the things super well. I do them well enough. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the fabric. Now you've just watched some of the videos of behind the scenes videos in the shop. I'm going to show you the fabric in a minute, but I don't think I've mentioned this. If you wanted to start doing this at home, here's a couple of things you'd need. Get yourself some dye. You can buy dyes like Brit dyes at the store. You can buy them in liquid form or powder form. I mean, liquid form is flexible in that it's not as dangerous because you don't have to worry about breathing in. You don't have to worry as much about breathing in powder, which you would in, like if you're mixing powder dyes at your home, you want to make sure you're wearing a mask. You want to make sure there's ventilation. You don't want your kids around. If you're using liquid, you don't have to worry about that as much. But I would still, if you're at your house, I would definitely recommend wearing a mask. And then you want to make sure you have gloves that don't, because you don't want to dye your fingers and you don't want to expose yourself to chemicals you don't need to. You'll need pots and spoons and measuring cups and things, squeezy bottles, like the squeezy ketchup bottles, things you can get like at the dollar store, the thrift store. And you want to label them or keep them in a spot that is only for dye. You don't want to mix your dyeing tools with your food tools. So keep them in a special place. I often use, the other thing I use a lot of is like dishwasher pans, like plastic dishwasher pans. You can usually get these at the thrift store, at the dollar store even, or Walmart. And I use them to put things in. Another thing that's helpful is large sheets, like metal cooking sheets, something that's deep enough to hold the dye, but wide enough to spread out your whole thing, like your whole thing of yarn, your whole skein of floss, your whole piece of fabric, so that you can paint on it or dribble things on it. You might, if you don't have a place where you can wash things, or dryer that you want to, you don't necessarily want to put dye stuff in your regular washing machine and dryer unless you want to run cycles in between them. So between like doing dye work, you might run a load of crappy towels in between to clean your washer and dryer out. That's what I usually do at work. um we also have specific washer and dryers for that. Obviously, most people don't have like extra washer and dryer in their house. So sometimes people use salad spinners. Like those things you press down that squeeze the water out. You can use that to squeeze your excess water, keep rinsing and squeezing your water out, and just do it in the slop sink in your basement or your house, or outside in the yard. You can rinse that stuff out. Um, Otherwise, just plan to have crappy towels and sheets to run a cycle. Usually I run a bleach cycle in between when I'm doing washing and spinning of dyed fabric. Often I am not washing the fabric that I dyed in my washer. I'm just using the washer to rinse and spin, if that makes sense. Um, like I said, so you could also skip that step and just spin it with a salad spinner to get the water out, and then just hang it to dry, let it drip dry, etc. I tend to like using the dryer because I want it faster. I also like the heat part to kind of heat set my pieces, with the hope that they won't bleed. I'm also rinsing them many times until the water's running clear. And I also soak mine in a dye fixative, which you can get from Dharma company, Dharma Fiber in it's like in it's like right where my husband's family lives in San Rafael in California. And they have a great, you can get dye there, you can get fabric there, blanks, like pre-made garments that are white and cotton or silk so that you can dye on top of them. It's a great store. You can get fiber there, to yarn to dye yourself, etc. I haven't seen if they have floss to dye there though. That could be interesting. I want to do that next, is do some over dyed floss on my own, but we'll see in my copious spare time. Okay, what else do you need? So rubber, I said gloves. You might want tongs to lift things out. I mean, you can use, as long as your gloves are pretty resistant to heat, you could do that, but you don't necessarily want to put your hand in boiling water. That would be dangerous. So tongs are great. You want something to heat your water on. So you could use your stove. It'd be better if you had a hot plate or something that is not where you cook food. So one of those would be good. If you're using liquid dyes, you can just use like super hot water from your sink. Um, and you don't necessarily need to boil it. Or you can try that out and see. Sometimes the hotter water helps the dye set better, but um, I've also dyed without like super boiling water. I've just used hot water. It's fine. When you're using powder dyes, though, you really need heat to help get those dyes to dissolve, or else you'll end up with little crystals. And some dyes are just crap. You will Sometimes dye goes bad or it gets old. I feel like we have a purple. You'll see when I show you the fabric. Our purple dye that I've been using, like, never wants to dissolve all the way. So it ends up with little like hot spots, which it's okay. It creates texture. But if you wanted something perfect, I would be annoyed. Like if I was dyeing silk for a party dress, I'd be super annoyed if I had these hot spots on it. That is not ideal. Other things people use, I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there that teach you how to dye better than I'm lazy and I just do it the way that I do it. Other things you can do is you can use salt to help the color. You can use salt or Synthropol to pre-treat your fabric to let the dye set better, but that's kind of rough on things like linen, because linen is like, a plant-based fiber, and that kind of stuff can really damage the linen. So I just like, don't worry about it. Sometimes I've used Synthropol to pre-soak, but it's not important. You can get away without it. Cottons will take dyes like crazy. Other things you can use to dye, if you're worried about food contamination, or you want to do it in your kitchen and you don't have access to, you don't want to like go buy things that you are only going to use for dye, is you could use natural dyes that aren't going to be toxic, or food-based dyes. Like I've used like Kool-Aid makes great dye. It tends to work best on, because it's really acidic, it's an acid dye, so it tends to work best on protein-based materials, so like silk and wool. So if you've got one of those even weaves that has a wool blend in it, it would work really well. Or you're dyeing silk floss, like Kool-Aid will make some great dye and it smells really fun. Plus you can get like fun kind of neon colors with like acidy colors with it and make some nice fun pastels. And then you don't have to worry about that's not it's not non-toxic. So you don't have to worry about having separate pots and pans for that. You could just do that in your kitchen. You could also use things like vegetable dyes, like onion skin. You could boil onion skin and it makes interesting yellows. Some fruits will make some different colors. There's a whole, I'm sure there's a whole wealth of natural dye videos and books out there, but I've done that before. Like for sure, like chamomile tea, you could use tea, coffee, to model your fabric and do the same kind of things and just rinse and wash it. And then you don't have to have separate pots and pans and utensils that are only for like chemical dangerous stuff. And what's nice about those kind of things is you could do them with your kids, right? Play around with your kids. I mean, how fun would it be to dye a bunch of things with Kool-Aid, right? Um, and just experiment. If you're buying, go buy cheap Ada and see what happens. Go buy, get one of those like bed sheets of Ada you can get at Amazon and cut it into small pieces and experiment on it. I recommend taking, when you do experiments, think of it like science. So like you take a square of Ada, like how, do like a fat eighth or a fat quarter, and then take notes. Like I use this much, I use this lemon, or I used, I boiled 5 onion skins and blah and tested it and kept it in the water this long and the water was hot or whatever. And so you can know what you did so that you can recreate it later if you like it, or know what not to do next time, right? Does that make sense? So kind of just thinking about how you might experiment with this. And that's the same kind of stuff that I do. Like if I find I often will do, like if I'm going to dye a ton of fabric for a big dress for a costume, I will take a small piece of the fabric and test it out first. Like I'll say, okay, here's with a tablespoon of rose pink and a tablespoon of neon pink mixed together, blah. Here's this, like I'll do different variations and see which color I like the best and which technique I like the best. And then we will recreate it on a large scale, because you don't want to like throw 10 yards of, $25 a yard silk in a bin and just experiment with that. You experiment on a small scale and then scale it up as you find something successful, but also be totally forgiving of mistakes. And the beauty of modeled fabric is that there are no mistakes, right? You can, if what might not work in the project that you had in mind might be perfect later on, right? So that's what's kind of nice about this, is every failure is actually just potential for a new project or a new exciting visual to add to another project later. Okay, I talked at you enough. Now here are some of the fabrics. So this is the Ada. This was a large piece of Ada that I got from I think I got this from the thrift store. It came in a big bin. I got it folded in half because I've got a project because I got it home and started right away, and I'll show you the start in another video. But this was the one I dyed using mostly purples and some blues and a little bit of red on here. And you can see in a couple spots. So this is, you also want to look at, like, sometimes, like, this is the side that I put the dye on. I want to show you what the others, and you can see like right here, like here's one of those little hot spots that I'm talking about with the purple, but it kind of creates texture. And this I crumpled up in a dish pan and then spooned the dye on to it, and then would rinse it out, spin it, and then do it again if I wanted to add more stuff later. Here I'm going to show you the difference between, this is the side that I put the dye on. This side is a little softer. I don't want to show you so I did the softer side. Actually, I don't even know if I meant to. I think I meant to do the other side, but it's just the little hot spots are a little less intense on this side. But anyway, I think it turned out, I was pretty pleased with it. It's a little too small for my project, so I kind of have to wedge it in there with the teeniest of tiny margins. But what are you gonna do? Okay, this was a even weave piece of fabric that I got in a I went to the little used craft store in my town the other day and got a little bundle of random stitching fabric for $2.99, and this was one of the pieces that were in it, and I just added kind of dirty schmutz kind of. This was with just cocoa brown dye, watered down, and then just added just threw little splotches all over it and then rinsed it out just to kind of create like an all over kind of dirty dishcloth texture basically. I was pretty happy with that one. This was some sparkle Ada, you know, the one that has the iridescent thread through it that I got in some kit. And I wanted to just kind of do like a rainbow pride situation on it. There, this is probably the side I'm going to use. And right now there's a, sorry, it's got a crease in it. But I want to show you on this side, like this is where, see how there's, this was something I ran into and I was really bummed about it, is that where this had been folded before, it clearly, I rinsed this before I did these. I washed them, you know, rinsed them in a sink, but clearly this was dirty. This was folded the other way before, and there was dirt that then I couldn't get rid of. And so it kind of like picked up the dye. So it's not, I don't see it on this side. So this will be the side that I use. But once I realized there was dirt, I went back, and this originally was a smooth model. And I think I show you this in the video. It was really much more of a smooth gradation of color. And then I went back once I saw that there was that dirt line. I was like, well, I'll add more texture to it, hoping that will camouflage it a little bit more. And I think it does. So yeah, so now there's more blotchy, but I think it's still fun and be really pretty. I'm planning to do, I'll talk about this later, but I'm planning to put some sort of like sign that says like all are welcome or you belong or something to put on my door at work to indicate, or I might put safe space on it so that students can like would know that I'm a, you know, I just thought it'd be nice to put on my door and be welcoming for students, you know, and be fun and festive. And our office is like a 1960s brutalist hellhole looking building, like the most hideous building on campus. And my office is just the saddest. So I'm trying to perk it up. I thought that would be fun and pretty to sew on for June. Here's another of that Sparkle Ada. And this one I kind of just did like, I wanted this to be like unicorn poop, you know? So that's kind of what I did. It's just a bunch of different colors I threw on there. And yeah, it's fun. I think it's pretty. I was thinking, and then I ombre dipped the edges again, right? So I'm wondering if I thought I might do some sort of like, it would be really cool with something in the middle. I thought, well, not that I normally would do like a Nora Corbett or no, normally, like I've done so many. Who am I? If I were going to do like a Nora Corbett style fairy, like a pretty fairy lady, it could be really pretty on the middle of this. And even though it's Ada, I think it's nice, and then because it's got that sparkle to it, it could be cool. And then like a bit sparkle fairy in there could be really fun. I thought about like I was thinking about designing my own fairy and doing some crazy like, you know, Dazzler 1970s Dazzler roller skating fairy, super queer pride fairy. Maybe it could be really fun on there. We'll see. Maybe I'll come up with something. Here's another piece of random Ada that was in a bin I got. It even has like somebody did some tiny stitches and I didn't have a seam ripper to take it out, so I just dyed it. So I just experimented throwing, this is some black spatter on it. And I did this because I just I have a project in mind for this, which you will see in another video. I'm gonna do some spooky stuff on this, a little spooky small on that. Here's another I did with the black as well. This one is in, this one I think is, ooh, I don't remember. This one I got out of a roll. I think it's, this is linen. This is a linen from, that I got from Michael's or Hobby Lobby, one of the two. So I think it's a Zweigart 32 count linen. Yeah, it might be 28 count linen now I'm looking at it. And I just did, this is more for spooky stuff. So I just did spatters all over it, kind of a black, and then rinsed it. So it's got a little bit more of a gray tone. Yeah. And that was more for spookies. Here's another kind of unicorn poop one that I did. Then this one's just in blues and purple on a larger piece of that luminescent. So here's the wrong side, meaning the side that I had down. And here's the side that I threw the dye on. And hopefully, can you see how the purples are more hot on this? Which is interesting. So like when you get fabric and you dye it, make sure you look at both sides because you might like the wrong side better than the right side or vice versa, you know? yeah, I think it depends on what I use this for, but it could be fun. It's very sparkly and girly. Who knows? Here's another piece of this was from that random bag of fabric, of stitching fabric. It's a much chunkier even weave. Like maybe it's a hardanger. It feels like linen though. I mean, I could do a burn test on it to figure out what the content is, but it's definitely chunkier. And so I did this more as an option for Halloween smalls. It's got more, I don't know if you can see, it's got more texture. It's got more slubby linen. So it's going to make something like whatever you stitch on it is going to be kind of wonkadoo. So that's why I thought it might be good for something spooky. I've got some stuff in mind. Here's another piece. This was a piece of even weave. So I think this is the cotton even weave from Michaels, like the Michaels Loops and Threads brand. And I just did this in orange and yellow and red, which is because it was watered down, it comes out pink. I think it's very pretty. It's very, could be some very summery. Could be Halloween though, because it's mostly orangey, but I don't know. I think it turned out nice. As I've noticed, whenever I go, the two places I go around here, the local needle places, and I haven't gone to the one back in Roscoe, they have very sedate colors. They don't do a lot of like festive fabric. So even if I wanted to buy something that was already dyed, it just seems like nothing is festive. It's all like chocolate or brown or dirty brown. Like it's nothing is like rainbow. So here's another little tiny piece of this is, it feels like a cotton even weave. Maybe it's a, what's that one that has a rayon in it? Is it Lugana? Like a modal, whatever. Because it feels smooth. And I just dipped it in a little bit of modeling coffee, or this is the cocoa brown. And I think it turned out pretty nice. This would be good for small. A good experiment too of like, oh, can I do a neutral that looks like those fancy ones that I see everybody holding up? Yes, I can. And then here's another. This was a piece of linen. This is the one, a Zweigert linen that I got at Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby. I'm sorry, everybody. I think it's like a 42 or 46. It's like the Bristol. I think that's what they called it. I don't think it was Bristol. Maybe not. But it looks tiny. It's like, so I'm like, can I even sew on this because I'm blind? And I just did a brown town on it with a few dashes of purple by accident because I didn't mean to put purple on it, but I did. But it's just kind of messy brown. And this was another one I thought, well, maybe I can do something spooky on it. I just don't know if I can deal with how tiny the holes are. So I might end up using this for regular embroidery as opposed to cross stitch. We shall see. And did I do this one already? Did I do this one? It's just another piece of brown. I don't know if I showed you this. Some more, yeah, brown. This was more of the cocoa brown on an even weave. And yeah, so those are my dye experiments from the other day. I think they're all pretty successful. And I hope you enjoyed and maybe learned something. If you have something to add, or if I said something horribly wrong that you want to correct, feel free to put it in the comments. Thanks. And I hope you get some stitching and dyeing and whatever craftiness done, whatever type of crafty beaver work you like to do in your copious spare time. Thanks.